Every March, we celebrate the United Nations International Women's Day. And each year, many of us hope that we can mark new milestones for women around the world. And most years, we do see small progressive steps in many nations around the world. Here in Ontario, we passed the Sexual Violence and Harassment Plan. But March is also Women's History Month. And as a woman legislator and one of the 38 female MPP elected on the legislature in 2014, we see little around the legislative building that recognize the important contribution female legislature have made to this province. And I think this has to change. Walking around the grounds and in the legislature, if you pay close attention, you start to realize the art is heavily male. The busts are nearly all male, and the statues contain only one historical female figure. My motion, which will be seeking unanimous consent during second reading this afternoon, is that 2 statues of the first female MPP should be erected on the legislative ground. Margaret Ray Luckock and Agnes Macphail were both elected in 1943 election. Their contribution to our legislative history and Ontario society are enormous. And it could be more appropriate to walk them through during Women's History Month. Ray Luckock and Agnes Macphail won in 1943, at a time where women were more expected to be at home than actually in this house. By receiving their party's nomination and getting elected on their own merits, these women broke a significant glass ceiling and provided a much-needed breakthrough for women in politics. Ray was one of the first females to question the evolving workplace, pondering whether females would want to leave the workplace to go back to the house after the men returned from the war. Agnes Macphail led an illustrious career as the first female MP and also the first female MPP introduced the first pay equity law in the province history in 1951. Many of you may not have known any of these facts, and this is sad reality we must change. The longer our grounds and our legislature are absent of statues to Ray Luckock and Agnes Macphail, the longer we send a signal to the women of this province that we do not value their legislative contribution as much as men. So, in Women's History Month, let's us start to remember Ontario's history. That history has a place for everyone, male or female, and let's honor those who've made Ontario the place it is today, starting with Ray Luckock and Agnes Macphail. Merci. I have a few guests that I just also would like to recognize some of my colleagues who are here with me today. Peter, Anne, Sherry, and our next person to say a few words is actually, and I'm actually very honored to have him here today, and a little bit emotional about that. I would like to invite Lloyd Luckock to speak, and Lloyd is the grandson of Ray, and he's here to talk about the trailblazer of a person that was his grandmother. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank Marie-France for having me here for this occasion. It's a very proud moment for the Luckock family, and to represent the Luckocks. The family is very important and a real honor for us, and I really would like to thank you for this. My grandmother, who I got to know when I was a child and into my teens, she was an unbelievable person. She was a strong her, and I remember I'll just give you a brief family history where she's a very warm, her smile, her laugh, I remember, her steely eyes, and I don't know why I think of her, and I think in some ways I think of Margaret Thatcher, because she was a strong person, and she would have made actually a good premier, I think, of a province or back then, but that wasn't going to happen, not with the male dominance at the time in politics. But she grew up in a family of politicians and business and in the farming community. Her father was J.J. Morrison, who was UFO, was one of the founders of the UFO, United Farmers of Ontario. And so she grew up in a business community as well, with strong business connections, and that really got her into the political spectrum. And from there, when her daughter died, she said, "I've got to get." She had a young daughter who died at a young age of polio back then, and it was when she died, and she says, "I've got to get out there and do something for people." And she was very much a people person, and she went and fought for all people, not just women, but definitely she was a woman, a trailblazer of a woman. And as my father said, she was a rebel, and because I mean she didn't back down to anyone. I mean, I saw that. She could talk to a president or a premier or throughout the world, which she did in her travels. She was a very good spokesperson. She spoke at the UN. A lot of people don't know this. Back in 1949, she spoke over in China, and actually had dinner with the premier there and got him up singing. Irish eyes are smiling, which was apparently at the time was like, who does that? And then she traveled throughout Europe, Poland and England and Denmark. And she wanted to do more, but in the end it was very stressful. And shortly after she got ill and she couldn't continue. She was asked to put on more speeches throughout the world, but had to decline. And but she did a lot for women. I know it's you've got it all spelled out. A lot of what she did for women and for the Canadian community and the world community. Again, she really was international. She was. I don't know of any other woman back then as a Canadian that was as an international presence, really male or female. For a while there, she had a presence, and that came across loud and clear. So I can say a lot more. There's a lot to say. She was very complex. It's another word used of my grandmother, as well as being a rebel in Parliament. But she was a very complex woman, but a woman that really fought for women's rights, for equality, for education. She was really she was a school trustee for 6 years as well. For forestry, for the environment, which was unheard of back then. Also for like carbon emissions. She was way before. This is what we're talking about today. And it's funny, this is going back how many years? 70, 75 years virtually, and that was being. And people would say, well, what are you talking about that for? But obviously, she did. She saw a future that was a problem if we didn't start cutting back on emissions and foresting our forests. And anyways, I know I only have a few minutes, so I should pass this on to the next individual. So
thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite Jean Augustin, who during her time as an MP brought forward the first motion that helped drive the conversation about honoring the first Famous Five. Thank you.
Thank you, Madame. And I'm so very pleased to be at this platform with people who are making things happen. We have so much in Canadian history that we need to be that we have to be proud of and we have to share with our young people. My small contribution in ensuring that the statue of the Famous Five were placed on Parliament Hill mirrors what you're doing today. A motion before the House. A motion that was to the point, no debate. Let's have this happen. I think that your task would be a little easier than mine was at the time, because there were statutes, on the Hill, there were rules. Only dead monarchs or prime ministers who were nation builders, statue could be on Parliament Hill. And so, first of all, we had to remove the old rules before we could begin to talk about a motion to put on Parliament Hill these women who were not prime ministers, and those women who were not considered to be nation builders or monarchs. And so the motion brought forward for unanimous consent, as I think yours is, you're asking for unanimous consent, was quite interesting because we had a number of no's And when one puts forward, you know this, a motion, you ask for unanimous consent, and there is a no. If the speaker allows, you can keep standing up for the rest of the day, putting the motion forward. And this is what I did. I persevered for an entire day, from 10:45 in the morning till about 5:45 in the evening, getting up, getting shot down, getting up again, getting shot down, and just kept by sheer persistence. But I think the history of these women in their times, and you spoke about 73 years ago, your grandmother Ray, what the social climate was at the time, the issues at the time, the situation of women at the time. Those issues and those concerns brought to us today are important. And I think symbols are also important. And as we look at our young people and their knowledge of real Canadian history, we have to make sure that the place of women in Canadian society is underscored and underlined. We've just come through Black History Month, and over the month, in several big functions, when I saw the cover of booklets or I saw the heading, there were pictures of great American Black people. And he said, this is Black History, Canadian Black History Month. Where are the Black Canadians who are making contributions? And if we don't put this in our history book, if we don't teach this, if we don't have the symbols that as one drives by, one can say, oh, there is Agnes, she was, or there is Ray, she was. And I think that this would also be encouraging educators, researchers, historians, museum keepers, and all those people who need to help us to get Canadian history front and foremost in the minds of our young people. So I want to congratulate you for this, and I want to tell you it may not be easy. It might be easier in the province of Ontario with some of your colleagues here ensuring that it happens. But again, one of the women had said, just go for it and let them howl.
Thank you. Mrs. Augustine, thank you very much. And you know what? That's a little bit the way I see this is I will not abandon this cause. And I told this to a few people until until the end, I'll make sure that we have those two statues on this ground. So I feel very passionate about that myself. But I'll look forward maybe of having some insight from you as to how to, make sure it's all done right. Next, I would like to welcome Mrs. Thelma McGillivray, the Vice President of the Provincial Council of Women of Ontario, to say a few words. Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Well, what a day. Good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this special day. My name, is Thelma McGillivray, and I'm the Vice President of Status of Women for the Provincial Council of Women, an organization that's been going since 1923. So we're no stranger to the history of what women have done or the issues that we are all fighting for still. To study the lives of these women is inspiring. There is much to admire and emulate. So my first comment would be a hope that people of all ages will learn about them. Why? Well, they will learn how much resilience, determination, and hard work it takes to achieve one's dreams. Agnes Macphail became the first female member of Parliament in 1921. She served Canada for 19 years before she and Ray Luckock were elected in 1943 to the Ontario Legislature. What brought these women into the political arena? I think as farm children, they knew how precarious work was, providing a living and putting aside something for the next year's crop. Born in 1890 and 1893, respectively, Macphail and Luckock experienced many hard times: the First World War, the Great Depression, the Second World War. They learned firsthand how people struggled to find decent paying jobs in order to survive. And mostly, they also had ideas and solutions to address those needs. Agnes Macphail's tremendous energy placed her in the vanguard of action with her flamboyant and inspired fight for issues with which we still struggle today. Her activism, such as prison reform, defense of the farm, developing cooperatives, equal rights for women, ideas she fought for with a wonderful sense of humor, a tough, brilliant mind, and an incredibly sensitive spirit. She became an enthralling speaker. Ray Luckock brought to the legislature a determined focus on adult education, education for rural students, and advocated for free university tuition. Imagine that. Like Macphail, she was a vehement supporter of women's rights, equal pay, and state-funded daycare. After 1945, her days of lecturing on social issues from a soapbox on the lawn of Queen's Park, right here, is legendary. She never stopped advocating for change, as her biography demonstrates. Both women had within them a powerful driving force and such desires to make a difference that they had to be strong to push through the barriers set up by tradition during their time. For example, women in what was then a man's world meant disapproval and active opposition inside and outside the political arena. But in spite of very, very real struggles, or because of them, they lived long and vigorous lives as long as they were able. In view of the current controversy over marriage versus career, they carried on their careers. While Ray Luckock raised children and ran her household and was overtly criticized for it, so was Macphail, who had never married. The sad irony is neither women benefited financially from their great contribution to society. While they fought for fair wages for others, they did not qualify for any retirement security. In 1954, Macphail was plagued with ill health and poverty and succumbed to a fatal heart attack at age 63. Ray Luckhart's health also deteriorated. She spent her remaining years in a hospital and died in 1972. They blazed the trail for other women. It's only fitting that there should be permanent markers on the grounds of Queen's Park so that every passerby can be reminded of just how much these women gave to society. Today, March the 24th, is Agnes Macphail's 126th birthday and Ray Luckhart's 123rd year. I think it's about time we honor them, don't you?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Finally, I would like to welcome Nancy Coldham, the Vice President of Equal Voice Toronto, to say a few words.
Well, thanks, Marie-France and everyone who's here today. I think all we've been listening to is the missing history, her story in Ontario and in Canada, and I'm delighted to see this effort to fill that gap. Equal Voice is actually celebrating its 15th anniversary. This is 2001 when we were established to give voice and to also encourage women to run for political office. What we're hearing today in the stories of your grandmother, of Ray Luckock and Agnes Macphail, is what we call She Did, You Can. And when our youth, our young women in particular, do not know the stories of the women trailblazers who went behind, they're not likely to be able to repeat it, right? So I'm also delighted for you, Marie-France, to see Sherry DeNovo standing here with you. Sherry's been a great champion of Equal Voice and a program that she helped start here called Girls Government. And on April 12th, we're going to have girls coming to Queen's Park because April 12th, another history moment, is the anniversary of women getting the vote in Ontario, 1917. So April 12th, 1917. So this is great timing for Agnes Macphail and Ray Luckock to have this initiative being launched as well. And all I can say, Jean, who is also a Agnes Macphail Award winner, 2007, we're here today with some more trailblazers, but the trail goes cold if we don't continue to persist and push that these stories be told, and that they be told, luckily, in bronze or iron now, so that they can't be forgotten. So thank you. Equal Voice is proud to stand here with you. We will help with the fundraising, and we will keep these stories and these wonderful women's accomplishments alive for all. Thank you.